I learned something about silence that day, how it can fill a room faster than screaming, how it can crack open the careful architecture of a life and leave everyone standing in the wreckage, holding their breath, waiting to see who breaks first. It wasn't me. People think revenge is hot. They imagine thrown plates, shouted accusations, dramatic exits through slamming doors. But real revenge is ice. It's the kind of cold that burns when you touch it. The kind that spreads slowly through your veins until you realize you're not shaking from fear anymore. You're shaking because you've finally stopped apologizing for existing. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I was 28 years old, standing in a church vestibule in a dress that cost more than my first car, listening to 200 people on the other side of those oak doors, waiting for me to walk down an aisle toward a man I thought I knew. The dress was ivory silk, not white. I'd been specific about that. White felt like a promise I wasn't sure anyone could keep. Ivory felt honest. It caught the light through the stained glass and made me look like I was already glowing from the inside. My mother had cried when she saw me in it. Not sad crying. The kind that means you did it, you made it, you're going to be fine. I should have known better. Claire arrived when I was checking my lipstick for the third time. My maid of honor had just finished adjusting my veil, stepping back to admire her work with that satisfied smile people get when they've created something beautiful. The door opened. I expected my father. I got my future mother-in-law instead. She was wearing white. Not ivory, not cream. White, bridal white. A floor-length gown with lace sleeves and a fucking train. Her hair was done in an elaborate updo, small flowers woven through it like she was the one walking down the aisle. She stood in the doorway, backlit by the afternoon sun, and smiled at me with all her teeth showing. "Darling," she said, "you look lovely." My maid of honor, Sarah, who'd known me since college, made a sound like someone had punched her. I watched her face cycle through confusion, outrage, and then land on the careful blank expression we all learn when we're trying not to make a scene. I didn't make a scene either. "Claire," I said, "that's quite a dress." She turned in a small circle, the train sweeping across the floor. "Do you like it? I wanted to look special." "It's not every day your son gets married." She paused, her eyes meeting mine with something that might have been amusement. "The first time, anyway?" "First time." The words landed soft but deliberate, like she was already writing the eulogy for this marriage before it started. I remember thinking, she wants me to react. She wants me to cry, to call her out, to create chaos that will center her in the narrative of my wedding day. So I smiled. "You always know how to make an entrance." Something flickered across her face. Disappointment, maybe, or respect. It's hard to tell with people like Claire, people who've spent their whole lives mistaking cruelty for strength. The ceremony happened. I walked down that aisle on my father's arm, my bouquet of white roses and eucalyptus trembling slightly in my hands. Not from nerves, from the sheer force of will it took to keep my face serene, while I passed row after row of guests trying not to stare at Claire, seated in the front row in her white gown, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief like she was the bride's grieving mother. My husband, let's call him Marcus, though that's not his name, looked uncomfortable when he saw her. A muscle twitched in his jaw, but he didn't say anything. He just took my hand when I reached the altar and whispered, "You look incredible." I wondered if he'd noticed what his mother was wearing. I wondered if he'd planned this with her. I wondered a lot of things in that moment, but I pushed them down deep where they couldn't reach my face. The ceremony was beautiful. The priest spoke about love and commitment, about two people becoming one flesh, about the sacred bonds of marriage. Claire sniffled loudly through the whole thing. Every time someone glanced at her, she'd press that handkerchief to her nose and shake her head like she was overcome with emotion. We said our vows. Marcus slid the ring onto my finger, platinum with a single diamond, simple and elegant, exactly what I'd wanted. I slid his ring on, feeling the weight of it, the permanence. The priest pronounced us husband and wife. Marcus kissed me. Everyone clapped. That should have been the end of it. The worst should have been Claire's white dress, her dramatic tears, her obvious attempt to steal focus on someone else's day. That should have been the story we'd tell at dinner parties years later, laughing about my inappropriate mother-in-law, shaking our heads at her audacity. But Claire wasn't finished. The reception was at the country club. Soft lighting, round tables with centerpieces of roses and candles, a string quartet playing something classical and romantic in the corner. I'd spent months planning every detail, the menu, the seating chart, the timing of the toasts. I wanted everything perfect. Not because I'm a perfectionist, though I am, but because I wanted one day where everything went according to plan, where life was beautiful and predictable and nothing went wrong. Claire wore a shawl over her white dress during dinner, a small mercy. People stopped staring quite so openly. I ate salmon that tasted like paper and drank champagne that might as well have been water. Marcus kept his hand on my knee under the table, squeezing occasionally like he was trying to communicate something he couldn't say out loud. His father, Gregory, tall and gray-haired and mostly silent, sat on Claire's other side, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. He'd given a short toast earlier, welcoming me to the family with words that sounded rehearsed and hollow. Claire had squeezed his hand and smiled at me over the rim of her champagne flute, like we were sharing a private joke. We weren't. The toast happened. My father spoke about watching me grow up, about the fierce little girl who'd skinned her knees learning to ride a bike and refused to quit until she could ride with no hands. Sarah talked about our college years, about late nights studying and early mornings running, about how I never gave up on anything I cared about. Marcus's best man told some story about a fishing trip that was probably supposed to be funny, but mostly just sounded like they'd gotten drunk and lost their tackle. Then Claire stood up. No one had asked her to. Her name wasn't on the toast list, but she stood holding her champagne glass and tapped it with a spoon until the room went quiet. The string quartet trailed off mid-phrase. 200 people turned to look at her. She was smiling. "I know I'm not supposed to speak," she said. Her voice carried beautifully. She'd probably practiced. But I simply couldn't let this day pass without sharing something important. Marcus tensed beside me. I felt it through his hand on my knee, the sudden rigidity of his entire body, like he knew what was coming, like he'd been dreading this moment but hoping it wouldn't arrive. "Marriage is such a sacred institution," Claire continued. "The joining of two people in love, the creation of family, the promise of future generations." She paused, looking around the room with that same bright smile. "Which is why I'm so thrilled to announce that Marcus and I are expecting." The silence that followed was absolute, not the polite quiet of people listening to a speech, not the comfortable hush of anticipation. This was the silence of 200 people collectively forgetting how to breathe. The silence of reality fracturing. The silence of everyone in the room trying to process words that couldn't possibly mean what they seemed to mean. I didn't move. I sat there with my champagne glass halfway to my lips, frozen like a photograph. Around me, I could feel the ripple of shock spreading outward. Someone gasped. Someone else made a choking sound. Sarah's hand found my shoulder and gripped hard. Claire kept talking. "I know it's unusual," she said, laughing a little, like this was a charming surprise and not a bomb detonating in the center of my wedding reception. "But life is full of surprises, isn't it?" When Marcus came to me 6 months ago, so lost, so confused about his engagement, I simply wanted to comfort him. Her eyes found mine across the room. They were bright with something that looked like triumph. One thing led to another, as these things do. And now we're going to have a baby. Marcus stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "Mother, what the fuck? Don't use that language," Claire said, her voice sharp. "Not in front of our guests. Our guests. Like this was her party. Like she hadn't just announced at my wedding reception that she was pregnant with my husband's child." I remember thinking, this isn't real, this is a nightmare. I'm going to wake up, and this will be the kind of dream you tell people about as a funny story. But I didn't wake up. I was already awake. And everyone was staring at me, waiting to see what I would do. Waiting for the bride to scream or cry or faint or run. Waiting for the dramatic collapse of a woman who'd just discovered her marriage was over before it began. I set down my champagne glass. Carefully. The stem made a soft clink against the tablecloth. "That's quite an announcement," I said. My voice was calm. Steady. It didn't shake even though my hands were trembling in my lap where no one could see them. I looked at Claire, then at Marcus, then back at Claire. She was still smiling, waiting for me to break. "Marcus," I said, "is this true?" He looked like he was going to be sick. His face had gone gray, his eyes wide and desperate. We need to talk, privately, please. I think we're past private conversations." I stood up slowly, smoothing down my silk dress. Every eye in the room was on me. My mother was crying. My father looked like he wanted to kill someone. Sarah's hand was still on my shoulder, gripping so hard it hurt. I looked at Claire, really looked at her, took in the white dress, the elaborate hair, the flowers woven through it like a crown, the satisfied smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Congratulations," I said. Then I walked out. Not ran. Walked. through the reception hall, past the tables of stunned guests, past the string quartet who'd stopped playing entirely, past the wedding cake I'd spent 3 hours choosing and would never cut. I walked out the door and into the parking lot, where the late afternoon sun was turning everything gold and beautiful, like nothing had just shattered into 1,000 pieces. Sarah caught up with me at my car. "Oh my God! Oh my God! Did that really just—" "Yes! What are you going to do?" I looked at her. Sweet Sarah, who'd been my maid of honor, who'd helped me pick out flowers and choose between dinner options and zip me into this stupid, expensive dress. Sarah, who thought the worst thing that could happen at a wedding was bad weather or a drunk uncle making an inappropriate toast. "I don't know," I said. That was the truth. In that moment, standing in a parking lot in my wedding dress, while my reception continued without me and my brand new husband's mother announced she was carrying his child, I had absolutely no idea what to do. But I knew what I wasn't going to do. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to give Claire the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. I was going to do something better. The hotel room Marcus and I were supposed to spend our wedding night in was already paid for. Presidential suite, king bed, champagne on ice, rose petals scattered across white sheets. I'd looked forward to it. To having survived the stress of the wedding, to finally being alone with my husband, to starting our life together. I went there alone, changed out of my wedding dress with slow, deliberate movements, hung it carefully in the closet where it looked like a ghost, put on jeans and a sweater, washed my face until my skin was pink and raw and clean of all the makeup that was supposed to make me beautiful. Then I sat down and started making a list. Not a revenge list. Not yet. Just information, facts, timeline. 6 months ago, that's what Claire had said. 6 months ago, Marcus came to her, confused about his engagement. I counted backward. That was right after I'd suggested we postpone the wedding by a month because of work obligations. He'd been upset. We'd fought. He'd spent a weekend at his parents' house, clearing his head. Apparently, he'd cleared more than that. I thought about every interaction I'd had with Claire since then. The way she'd insisted on being involved in every wedding decision. The way she'd shown up unexpectedly at dress fittings, cake tastings, venue walkthroughs. The way she'd touched my arm and called me daughter with this particular emphasis, like the word was a weapon she was testing out. The white dress made sense now. She wasn't trying to upstage me. She was trying to replace me. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Marcus, my mother, Sarah. Unknown numbers that were probably reporters or guests or people who'd seen social media posts and wanted to know if what they'd heard was true. I turned it off. In the silence, I could think. Claire had done this publicly for a reason. She could have told me privately. She could have told Marcus to tell me. She could have waited until after the wedding, after the honeymoon, after I was too committed to walk away easily. But she'd chosen the most dramatic moment possible, in front of everyone we knew, at the exact moment when I was supposed to be most vulnerable, most invested, most likely to just accept this because the alternative was too humiliating. She'd miscalculated. Humiliation only works if you're ashamed, if you think somehow you deserve this, if you believe the people judging you are right. I wasn't ashamed. I hadn't done anything wrong. I'd fallen in love with someone who'd turned out to be exactly as weak as his mother wanted him to be. That wasn't my failure, it was his. The list grew longer. Names, dates, details I'd overlooked at the time, but that made sense now. The way Marcus had been distant after that weekend at his parents' house. The way he'd stopped talking about the future, about children, about growing old together. The way he'd started working late more often, coming home tired and distracted and not wanting to talk. I'd thought he was stressed about the wedding. Turns out he was stressed about fucking his mother. No, that's not fair or accurate. Whatever had happened between them, however it started, it wasn't just sex. Claire was too calculating for that. This was about power, about control, about making sure Marcus stayed hers and hers alone. And he'd let her. That was the part that hurt most. Not what they'd done. Though God, the thought of it made my stomach turn. But that he'd let it happen. That he'd been so weak, so desperate for her approval, so terrified of being his own person that he'd destroyed everything rather than just say no. I stayed in that hotel room for 3 days, ordered room service, ignored the phone calls that kept coming even though I'd blocked most of the numbers. Let the do not disturb sign keep the housekeeping staff away. On the 3rd day, I called a lawyer, not the kind who handles divorces, though I'd need one of those eventually. the kind who handles estates and trusts and complicated family finances. Because I'd remembered something Claire had probably forgotten in her rush to claim victory. Marcus's trust fund, the one his grandmother had set up, the one that paid out $2 million when he turned 30 or got married, whichever came first. He'd turned 30 last year, hadn't received the money because his grandmother had added a clause. He had to be married and remain married for 1 year before the trust dissolved and the money became his. We'd been married for approximately 3 hours before Claire made her announcement. I asked the lawyer a simple question. If a marriage is annulled due to fraud, say, one party was already in a relationship with someone else and concealed it, does that void the conditions of a trust payout? The lawyer asked me several follow-up questions. Then he said, yes, it would. The marriage would be treated as if it never legally existed. Perfect, I said. Marcus finally found me on the 4th day, used a spare keycard he must have gotten from the front desk, came into the room looking like he hadn't slept, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes red. Please, he said. Let me explain. Explain what? I was sitting on the couch by the window, reading documents the lawyer had sent over. I didn't look up. It's not what you think. I think your mother announced at our wedding reception that she's pregnant with your child. What part of that am I misunderstanding? He sat down across from me, put his head in his hands. She's lying. That made me look up. What? She's not pregnant. She can't be. We never. He stopped, his face crumpling. We only did it once, and we used protection, and it was months ago, and she's had her period since then. I know she has. I heard her and my father talking about it. The room felt very cold suddenly. Once. I was drunk, I was confused. I'd been fighting with you about postponing the wedding, and I thought maybe it was a sign we shouldn't do this, and I went to her for advice, and she gave me wine, and we were talking, and then she was touching me, and his voice broke. I'm so sorry. I set down the documents. Looked at him, this man I'd planned to spend my life with. Who looked pathetic now, crying in a hotel room, trying to explain why he'd fucked his mother. Why did she say she was pregnant? I don't know, to punish me, to punish you, to ruin the wedding. He rubbed his face. She's been different since it happened, possessive, calling me constantly, showing up at my office. I thought if we just got married, if we just moved forward, she'd back off. You thought your mother would stop being obsessed with you after you married someone else. I thought she'd realize she couldn't control me anymore. The laugh that came out of me was sharp and bitter. Marcus, she's wearing a white dress to our wedding. She announced a fake pregnancy during the toast. You think she's going to just let you go? He looked at me with desperate eyes. We can fix this. We can move away, cut her off, start over somewhere she can't reach us. No, please, I love you. I made a mistake. You fucked your mother. The words hung in the air between us, ugly, undeniable. Once, he whispered. Once is all it takes. I stood up, gathered my documents. I'm annulling the marriage, fraud and concealment of a material relationship. My lawyer says it's straightforward. His face went white. The trust. Yes, the trust. You can't. That money was supposed to buy a house, start our life, fund the future you destroyed? I smiled at him. It wasn't a kind smile. Consider it the cost of your education. My grandmother wanted me to have that money. Your grandmother wanted you to build a stable marriage. You didn't do that. You couldn't even make it through the reception. He started crying again. Please don't do this. We can figure it out. I'll get therapy. We'll both get therapy. Family therapy, couples therapy, whatever you want. What I want is to never see you again. I left him there in the hotel room, crying, begging, promising things we both knew he'd never deliver. That should have been enough. The annulment, the trust money he'd never see, the humiliation of everyone knowing what he'd done. That should have been sufficient revenge, but it wasn't. Because Claire was still out there, still smug, still satisfied with how her plan had worked. She'd destroyed my marriage, sure, but she'd gotten what she wanted. Marcus, back under her control, too damaged now for anyone else to want him. So I did something I'm not proud of. Or maybe I am proud of it. I'm still deciding. I went to her house, not to confront her, not to yell or threaten or cry. I went to her house with a folder of documents and a calm smile, and the kind of certainty that comes from being so far past anger you've arrived at clarity. She opened the door in a silk robe, her hair down, looking younger without all the makeup she'd worn at the wedding. For a second, I could see what Marcus saw. Not his mother, just a woman. Attractive, manipulative, dangerous. Darling, she said, I wondered when you'd come. May I come in? She stepped aside. The house was exactly as I remembered it from family dinners. Tasteful, expensive, cold. Everything in its place, nothing out of order. We sat in her living room. She offered me tea. I accepted. We were so civilized, two women having a conversation. You wanted to know why, Claire said. It wasn't a question. I know why. You wanted him back. You couldn't stand that he'd chosen someone else. She laughed, soft, delighted. You think this is about jealousy, isn't it? Darling, I'm not jealous of you. I'm disappointed in him. She sipped her tea. I raised him to be strong, to take what he wanted, to not apologize for his desires. Instead, he became soft, gentle, the kind of man who asked permission instead of taking control. Her eyes met mine. You made him that way. I made him respectful. You made him weak. So you fucked him to… What, toughen him up? Another laugh. I didn't fuck him, he fucked me. There's a difference. I don't see one. Of course you don't. Because you think sex is about love, about connection, about two people choosing each other. She set down her teacup. Sex is about power, about who submits and who controls. Marcus needed to remember who he belongs to. He's your son. He's a man. Men don't belong to their mothers. They belong to whoever is strong enough to claim them. She tilted her head. I thought that would be me. Turns out it's no one. He's too broken now, too guilty, too pathetic. You broke him on purpose. I broke him because he needed breaking. Better that than watch him waste his life on someone who'd eventually leave him anyway. You don't know that I would have… Please. She waved a hand. Women like you always leave. You're too smart, too independent, too unwilling to tolerate imperfection. You would have left him the first time he disappointed you. I just expedited the timeline. I looked at her. This woman who destroyed her son's life and was sitting here drinking tea like she'd done him a favor. This woman who thought love was about control and strength was about domination and family was about ownership. You're right, I said. She blinked. What? I would have left him eventually. Because he's weak, because he lets you control him, because he can't stand up to you even when it costs him everything. I opened the folder I'd brought. But I'm not leaving quietly. I showed her the documents, the annulment papers, the trust fund details, the statement from Marcus's therapist, the one he'd started seeing 2 years ago, the one he'd told about his mother's inappropriate behavior, the one who'd documented every conversation in clinical detail. The annulment voids the marriage, which means the trust conditions aren't met. Marcus gets nothing. But there's a secondary clause you probably don't know about. I pointed to the relevant section. If the marriage fails due to documented interference from immediate family members, the trust doesn't simply return to the estate. It goes to the aggrieved party. Claire's face went very still. That's not $2 million, plus the interest that's been accumulating for the past decade. Comes to about $2.8 million total. I smiled at her. Your mother-in-law, Marcus's grandmother, really didn't like you, did she? The color drained from her face. You can't prove interference. Marcus's therapist notes, wedding guest statements, security footage from the reception showing you changing into the white dress in your car before you came in, text messages between you and Marcus that he's very cooperatively providing because he's hoping for leniency. I closed the folder. I can prove it. She stood up. Her hands were shaking. You're bluffing. Try me. We stared at each other, two women who'd both loved the same weak man and both been disappointed by him. The difference was, she'd tried to fix him by breaking him. I'd tried to fix him by leaving him intact. Neither of us had succeeded. What do you want? She asked finally. Nothing. I just wanted you to know what your little performance cost. I stood up, smoothed down my jeans. The money will be transferred to my account in about 6 weeks, once the annulment is finalized. I'm going to use it to start a foundation for women leaving abusive relationships. I'll name it after Marcus's grandmother. She'd appreciate the irony. You're taking everything from him. No. You took everything from him. I'm just making sure you don't get to keep it. I left her standing there in her cold, perfect living room. The money came through exactly when the lawyer said it would. $2.8 million. More money than I'd ever imagined having. More than enough to start over, to build something good from the wreckage of something terrible. I didn't see Marcus again, heard through mutual friends that he'd moved back in with his parents, that he was seeing a therapist 3 times a week, that Claire and Gregory were getting divorced. Apparently, finding out your wife fucked your son is a deal breaker even in wealthy suburban marriages. I didn't feel sorry for any of them. 6 months later, I was in a coffee shop in a different city. New job, new apartment, new life. I'd cut my hair short, started running again, learned how to sleep through the night without nightmares about white dresses and champagne toasts. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Hello? It's Marcus. I should have hung up. Didn't. What do you want? I heard about the foundation. It's good. What you're doing. Okay. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not just for what happened, but for all of it. For being weak. For letting her. His voice cracked. I'm in therapy. Real therapy. Not just talking about it, actually doing the work. Trying to figure out why I let her control me. Why I couldn't just... Marcus. Yeah? I don't care. Silence on the other end. Then softly. Yeah, I know. I wanted you to hear it anyway. I heard it. We're done now. We're done, he agreed. I hung up. Sat there in the coffee shop with sunlight streaming through the windows. My laptop open to foundation work. My life spread out in front of me like a map of somewhere I'd never been but was starting to recognize. Someone asked if the seat across from me was taken. I looked up. She was pretty, smiling, holding a coffee cup and a book. She looked kind. It's free, I said. She sat down. We started talking. Just small talk at first. The weather, the coffee, the book she was reading. Then deeper, about work, about life, about the things we were trying to build. She didn't ask about my past. I didn't offer it. That's the thing about revenge. It's not really about the other person. It's about reclaiming yourself, about remembering that you're the only person who gets to decide what you're worth. Claire wanted me broken. Marcus wanted me forgiving. The world wanted me to be either a victim or a villain. I chose neither. I chose to take the money and build something that mattered, to turn their ugliness into something clean and useful and good, to let them rot in their cold house together while I sat in coffee shops meeting kind strangers and planning futures they'd never be part of. That's revenge. Not the shouting kind, not the violent kind, not even the satisfying kind, really. Just the kind that lets you sleep at night knowing you didn't let them win. People say revenge changes you. They're wrong. It reveals you. It strips away all the careful politeness and shows you who you are when everything else is gone. I learned I'm someone who doesn't break easily, who doesn't scream when she should, who waits and watches and figures out the elegant solution instead of the obvious one. I learned I'm better alone than with someone who treats love like surrender. I learned silence is a weapon and patience is armor, and walking away is sometimes the bravest thing you can do. The woman in the coffee shop told me her name, asked if I wanted to get dinner sometime. I said yes. We left together, walking out into a city I barely knew, toward a life I was still figuring out. Behind me, somewhere, Marcus was probably still in therapy. Claire was probably still trying to control whoever was left in her orbit. My mother was probably still telling people about the wedding, about the scandal, about her poor daughter who'd married a monster. They could have it, the stories, the drama, the endlessly dissected narrative of what happened that day. I had something better. I had tomorrow. I had tomorrow. I had tomorrow. I had tomorrow.